Hello and welcome to Food Tank's webinar series. This is Sarah Small. I'm Food Tank's Global Events Director, and I'm really excited about today's webinar with Dr. Chuck Benbrook. He's a food and agriculture scientist and consultant with Benbrook Consulting Services. We're also honored to have Dr. Benbrook on Food Tank's advisory board. Today, his presentation will discuss the dollars and cents of soil health. This webinar will be recorded and posted on foodtank.com afterwards. You can also follow along and participate on Twitter using #FoodTank. So please submit your questions throughout the course of the webinar using the chat box on your screen, or you can email them to me as well, Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, @foodtank.com. So without further ado, Dr. Benbrook, it's wonderful to have you here today, and I'm excited to hear your presentation. I will give you the floor now.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to Food Tank for this opportunity. Let's get right into the slides. Go ahead, Sarah, and Vincent, please. So, often have heard about soil quality, and soil quality is really more of a fixed measure of the landscape and the soil on it, and it has these characteristics: the field slope and the percent loam, sand, and gravel, and rooting depth, etc. But there's actually much more to. Next, please. Soil quality and health really arise from a combination of things. First, of course, there's the land surface. The next slide. But the land, soil really won't grow anything without a solar energy that falls. Is a critical in both soil quality and soil health, and of course in agriculture productivity. So it also is critical to determine the percent of the growing season when there's actually active growth going on, either in a crop plant or a cover crop. That has a enormous impact over time on low quality soil health. Next, please. The production from any field is a function of the water that is natural rainfall or is available through irrigation. So the productivity of any crop field anywhere from the combination of given the state that it's in at the present time, the was available and the sun on it. That's really where soil productivity and soil health comes from. Next. And of course, perfect soil with no water is like a Ferrari with no gas. It's nothing. Next. Some of the specific drivers of soil health are, that have to be managed. Include the microbial diversity and activity, give the soil to both create and hold and cycle nitrogen, and make nitrogen available in step with leaves. It's obviously important not to be any significant chemical or biological imbalances that'll disrupt crop development and growth. And it's also increasingly vital throughout the world, organisms present that have become resistant to common control measures. The global challenge, for example, of weed resistance or other herbicides is extremely significant as a economic matter, as affecting production, also in terms of environmental quality and public health, as farmers are sort of onto a herbicide treadmill, a sad reality in much of the world. And also resistance to both traditional insecticides or the incorporated in BT corn and cotton. These are all aspects of soil health. Next. I searched the global soil science and economics literature pretty thoroughly, and I was to learn that there really hasn't been a single study anywhere in the world takes into account both the near term and long run from an economic point of view of either slipping soil health or enhanced soil health. Studies that look at or a few aspects of soil health, the resulting economic impacts, but to my really never been a comprehensive and rigorous anywhere in the world. Next, please. So one thing that I to feel pretty strongly is that really the intuitive insights of farmers and extension people that spend a lot of in an area over many years really bring more to the table in to determine health problems are and what they can do to address them and improve soil health. There isn't the science base at this time draw insights from the literature to in an economically viable sort of it's going to be a real challenge for the entire both in the developed world and in the to figure out how to move along the soil health continuum, if you will. Next. Working as part of my contributions to the Soil Renaissance project on methods to model the health, and I'm convinced that the only way we're going to put some solid dollar figures on the either the increase in costs associated with slippage in soil health or the reduction in costs through building soil health is to compare the performance of otherwise similar in the same area producing a similar mix of products, but with differing levels of soil health. I'm going to cover a few have done preliminary sort of way. Next, please. I really like about soil health along the continuum from moderate to high. In the limited soil health zone of this continuum, the soil would include things like poor texture, compaction, high bulk density, low in nutrients, and low in biological activity. With these sorts of characteristics, the soil is going to be highly vulnerable to runoff and drought, a variety of other production problems. Next, please. In sort of the moderate or average zone along the one would expect at least 2% organic matter content and often adequate root zone depth, so plants have ample soil to draw moisture. Good fertility, no major limits in N, P, or K, and a balanced and a reasonable level of biological supporting biological insects, for example. Next. In the high zone along the soil health continuum, and obviously this is the goal for the farmers will strive to attain. We have soils that are high in organic matter and the soils in an area. They have a brilliant microbial community that adapts and responds to whatever biotic and abiotic factors at play in a given year. they're not compacted, water flows down, and they're highly fertile. And these are the kinds of soils that are going to be much more resilient in the face of and drought. And also, these are the soils that will support a high level of crop production with substantially lower expenditures on inputs like fertilizer and pesticides. Next, please. So how do we move along the health continuum? Well, if you have a soil zone, begin to reduce tillage, get the pH balanced, and integrate some cover crops into the. One of the common characteristics of soils with poor soil health is farmer is only actively growing a crop on them for 2, 3, or 4 months a year, and then the land is essentially lying fallow, and moisture that falls on the land and all that solar energy that falls on limited. It is basically wasted, and this is one biggest problem, certainly in North America, where you can drive across the U.S. in late April, 75 degrees, and there's lots of moisture in the fields, and you will see bare ground in 80 to 85% of the prime corn belt land, Todas and into farmers are basically not utilizing their most valuable the land produce any biomass, and that is one of the things that's holding them down in this zone. Next slide, please. Once a farm moderate zone, they need to continue to do cover cropping, reduce tillage to the full extent possible, keep their pH balanced, but then they need to start adding some new soil amendments to diversify soil microbial communities and get more nitrogen cycling with it. They clearly have to avoid broad spectrum pesticides, especially soil, because that's going to undercut the biology of the soil, really make it difficult to get into the high zone. Next slide, please. Once to get soils up into there, farmers have to learn to manage microbial primary soil-borne insects and pathogens and bacterial pests. And this is certainly possible. Organic World do it every year. And part of the trick in maintaining a high level of productivity, but also healthy soils, is to develop custom soil amendments that draw on or regional inputs to really feed the microbial life in the soil, so that other inputs are not needed. The goal is to enhance soil health and get into this high zone and then stay there. Next, please. So to start to get at the soil health, I've heard estimates of in some case studies, which we're going to talk about now. And basically, the way economists go about this sort of thing is that they calculate the gross returns and costs, and hence net returns on farms than the high zone versus the moderate zone, and do this across many farms that fall in these different zones, calculate the average differences, and take into account all the role of variability of yield, fertilizer levels, etc. Next. We're going to talk about some in Australia, apple planting in Washington State. vegetable, corn and soybeans in the heartland, and land basin. Next. This Kelly citrus thrips is a serious pest in southern Australia. It was reducing the export quality fruit by 20% from this kind of surface damage to peel an orange with these ugly pests and burrowed into the surface of the orange. To try to deal with these insects, farmers were 1 to 5 applications of organophosphate, OP, very high risk insecticides that also impact insects, and they were having to from these sprays because of resistance. To work this problem with just ramping up reliance on pesticides, a team of scientists working with growers to try to bring about a higher level of microbial biocontrol through a soil amendment. Did a half dozen different treatments ranging from 40 tons per acre of animal manure to tons per acre of composted green waste, plus some animal manure. One-time application, and they achieved some unexpectedly positive results. Much higher soil moisture, increased diversity, and popular beneficial arthropods that would attack the Kelly citrus. They had a big increase in predatory mites, which helped them 3 to 6 fold increase in plant availability is economically very important. A 20% average increase in yields and as much as 60%. Very dramatic results. Next, please. So in terms of using those 2 OP sprays, saved the farmer $75 to $100 per hectare. The increased production and increased pack out of export quality fruit at $1,800 per hectare. And difficult to quantify, but still significant environmental benefits from improved reduced risk for workers, nutrient cycling, etc. Next, please. Florida in the United States, primary source of many of the winter vegetables that certainly on the East Coast and through the central part of the country. A fresh market tomato or pepper grower in Florida is going to, in a typical year, $20,000 to $25,000, and will incur production costs of $15,000 to $22,000. The profit at the end of the year depends on, in recent years, the 2 big drivers is how well a particular field hits the market in terms of demand. If you get into the market a couple weeks early, you can get a much higher price for your first picking. So the timing of marketing relative to movement in supply and demand, and hence price, is always a critical factor, but so is soil-borne nematode damage. Nematodes are without dominant economic pest today and tomato production in the States. Next, please. So the traditional tactic to address fumigation with methylbromide or chlorophyll, for example, USDA data shows in 2004 that 81% of the fresh market tomatoes were with 7.5 million pounds of methylbromide. It's a lot of methylbromide in a relatively small area. Farmers had successfully reduced that reliance of 30% of the acres treated, but they're also experiencing more significant greater yield damage in recent years. And so there's been a sort of renewed effort to find a more biological to the threat of nematodes. Next, please. So in dealing with post-methylbromide world, this is really this doesn't change if you're talking about California or citrus in Australia and Florida. The first line of defense is to try to plant health as much as possible. Second line of defense will be augmenting soil microorganisms, the capacity to produce the enzyme, the chitin-based skin in the nematode. A biological control method. And if that second line of defense done and farmers still experience a spike in populations, then a third applying a selective biocontrol agent that will directly stimulate or enhance the levels of these enzymes in the soil. Next, please. So looking at the economic solution to nematodes in Florida, the cost of the fumigation between $350 and $500 an acre. So if the farmers that skip the fumigant save that money, but assuming that they have to buy a bioinsecticide, which most of them cost $200 to $300 an acre, but because of the better control, they can actually increase their income by $10,000 per acre. Very significant savings, and this is why this technology being adopted so rapidly in feed. Next, please. In Washington State, we're really the nation's leading producer of apples and cherries and tree fruit. The reason that grown where they are in Washington State is because of a unique combination of water, sun temperature, and a farmer that owns land suitable for tree fruit production, will plant and manage a block of trees, 8, even 15 years. So when the trees need to be they want to always do replant right back into the same soil. One of the problems that they faced is what's generally called replant disease, where there's some imbalances in some number of years in apple. It could be pH problems, soil residual herbicides, diversity in the soil, opening the door to pathogens and nematodes. Next. So researchers have been working for a number of years on ways to address this, which has been estimated to cost as much as $40,000 in lost production over the 10-year life of an orchard. Next, please. Washington apple producers and other tree fruit producers have dealt with replant disease for 30 years. Has been malnutrition. It's in the soil and kills everything in the soil, both organisms and pathogens. The practice reliably increased apple yields, by 50 to 151 study, but methylbromide more replanting orchards has been phased out and is no longer an option. So researchers in the state and farmers had to come up next. Sorry, these video and audio problems. I don't know what happened to that picture, but in any event, a scientist developed a multi-tactic, utilized a mixture of brassica seed meals biofumigate the soil. It was very interesting. They tried a number of different brassica seed meals in isolation and had episodically effective results, consistent results. Had the brilliant idea of mixing together 4 or 5 brassica seed meals from different species of brassica and low sort of diversity in the chemical composition of the biofumigants in the brassica seed meal did the trick and actually ends up working better than methylbromide. Next, please. So the economic impact of using this fumigant has again been, you know, very up to 30% higher yields, translating into about 9 per acre per year. So it takes about 5, and according to the one long-term study that's been completed, it takes about 5 years the added cost of meal treatment. The innovative growers in the Pacific Northwest adopting additional practices that are kind of pushing this soil health envelope in other ways to production cost, plant health benefits, and again they're finding that there's a lot of room for improvement in the area of soil health. Next. This is a remarkable tale about a large. If you look on the right here, I hope you can see this hilly, craggy area very close to the Columbia River, about 30 miles from Yakima, Washington. Is a piece of raw land that had water purchased and converted into organic. It turned out that it was really the organic system that took soil health 0 to a very high level in a remarkable. Next, please. The company that bought this 2000 spent almost 2 years with a fleet of bulldozers and land movers reshaping the landscape so that they could on them. Some of the cuts were as deep as 20. Some of the areas that they had to fill. I visited this farm this summer, and it's hard to imagine ago. It was raw, rough, slopey sagebrush land. Next, please. The initial soil conditions, I mean, you can imagine having moved around that much soil, is very, very poor. The most of this this gray subsoil was very fluffy and had a way too high pH, almost no organic matter, production risks for compaction, poor water penetration, runoff, and low fertility. Next, please. But this field, these fields, this 2,000-acre chunk of land was less than 2 miles from the river. So, and it's in an area where there's very reliable and intense solar energy throughout the growing season. And so it was the combination of the availability of this, which was pumped up that hill, basically, that acre, that 250-foot hill you see, out into these circles that made this possible. The land production, 23 pivots, about 110 acres, into a sweet corn potato rotation. Of course, we've started out with such poor health and quality, a number of inputs were required, from manure to kelp, of course, all the back in, and heat-treated manure products were added to both increase fertility but avoid any food safety pathogen problems. Next. The first crop off, this is one of the 23 circles. It was in organic peas that year. By a bit, the regional 10-year organic pea. Next. In the second year, one of the circles is called 42 tons per acre of organic corn silage. That is a very substantial yield. And of course, this sweet corn silage went to regional organic dairy farms. Next. In the third year, on many of the circles, they grew organic Nematodes, just 30 tons per acre, and even the typical conventional yield, with extremely good size and a very high pack out. Next, please. Another circle in year 3, the carrot year of the rotation, 40 of organic dicer carrots, exceeding all of the nearby conventional yields in that year. Look at that incredible crop, and behind that that please. In the fourth one, this Northwest, they really kind of even amazed themselves. They had a record organic Supersweet Sweetcorn, 11 tons per acre of the corn in the husk on one circle. One went over 12. And to give this a little perspective, 100 bushel number 2 yellow field corn crop would be about 6 tons. Now, this sweet corn is both the kernel and the cob, so I would say the kernel is probably half the weight. So, very substantial yield. In terms of the the cost of the organic program was about $600 an acre, and the conventional program would have been about $350. The good news is that the cost of the organic program has come down since, this was about 2010 or 2011. There's been such growth in the organic acreage in this. There's a number of new companies manufacturing and selling organically approved. This cost is coming down, and I don't think it'll ever reach the level, but it certainly won't be nearly twice as much. Next, please. Last, a little bit about corn and soybeans in the heartland, and we're talking about over half of the cultivated cropland in the United States. There are a number of factors that are eating away at soil health in the heartland. I think perhaps by far the biggest is farmers come to expect that they can produce yields on an annual basis that are unsustainable. The handle it, the soil can. They're having more and more significant pest problems as a result, and As I noted before, one of the huge problems is that you've got this incredibly valuable land selling for $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 per acre, and farmers are only using 90 days. That's how much time there's an actual crop growing on the land. So they're trying to growth and income off of that land in a very short period of time, and the only way they can do it is excessive level of inputs, which are in turn leading to also production and environmental problems. Next, please. Some of the soil health related into profitability in the Midwest are health problems arising from excessive reliance on the Roundup Ready system. A lot of that, the spread of weeds and insects that are used, pesticides and GE plant traits. Farmers that are paying the premium for biotech seeds, and they're having to spend additional money to buy pesticides to try to avoid resistance to the biotech traits. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And of course, one of the huge problems in the Midwest is the asynchronous availability of nitrogen. Farmers are either putting all their nitrogen or perhaps splitting it, and they're putting on a lot of it. So for a growing season, there's much more in than the plant. Then sometimes in other parts of the year, not as much as the plants could. So this asynchronous availability of N, when most of it's coming from anhydrous ammonia, is a huge problem. Next, please. So I got data from a number of growers and consulted preliminary guesstimate of the difference in the limited, moderate, and high zone continuum to give a sense of the kind of economic advantages possible from progressing along the continuum, or the penalty that's going to be imposed on future profitability if soil health slips. So these differences. So if you move from the zone, you can reduce costs by something like $75 an acre, and if you go all high, it could be as much as $145. These are significant amounts of money, and clearly is why many farmers are really have gotten much in trying to understand their soil health challenges and looking for practices that can either move them along in a positive direction or slow their slippage. Okay, so just a few summary. It's never going to be enough to deal with all pests. Weeds are going to be part of anywhere in the world. They have to be dealt with. Soil health can help, but it's not going to be the full solution. Many adult insects can fly around and with extremely healthy soil and a diverse system, and really create havoc, viral propagules. And so things can happen in the world of pest management that are beyond its control. And this is why the degree of redundancy into their IP, and sometimes they'll need to make judicious use of biopesticides. Next. Farmers that really haven't paid adequate soil health or their integrated pest management systems, they're really have a serious problem, because the pesticide tool in terms of sort of fast acting, reliable kill power regulation, and certainly significantly because of the spread of resistance. And there is a proliferation and a lot of progress discovering and marketing new bio-based modes of action, none of which work as broadly as some of the old, but they can work when, and it's also important all of these more biologically based solutions, including pesticides, they typically work much better in a system with healthy soils. Please. One of the key lessons that's come out of sustainable farming systems around the world is that you can hit them in multiple ways and find out the stage of their evolution when they're most biologically vulnerable, and hit without disrupting other aspects. When you have healthy soils with microbial communities and lots of earthworms and arthropods, etc., combine biology with what weed scientists like hammers. Farmers can replace the big hammers like detailing bromide or chlorpyrifos or the other hot peas and carbamates. Many farmers are doing it already, but it's a management intensive system, and it requires thoughtful and rapid adaptive year to deal with circumstances that arise. Next, please. You've been convinced by these case studies that, farmers that are able to enhance soil health, expand above and below ground biocontrol horizons. In other words, the ways that they can deal with pests. And farmers that to move along the soil health continuum in a positive direction, or are unable to reverse health, have no choice but to cope with whatever weed, insect, pathogen problems they have by applying pesticides, and deal with the costs and the risks to themselves, their families, and society has to live with the consequence. I think we are well aware that there are many such consequences that no one is willing to accept on a long-term basis. So if we lose all the bees, we won't have any vegetables. Next slide, please. The soil, it's going to take time and investment to improve soil health, and there's no chance that government programs, foundations, philanthropy are going to put together enough to underwrite and support steady and continuous improvement in soil health. I think it's going to happen in a significant way. It will require farmers becoming convinced that it's in their short and long interest to spend the money now, perhaps take a small hit on their yields and now to build the foundation for a more profitable and sustainable future. Next. In specialty, and of course, these would be all of our high-value fruits and vegetables around the world that, while they account for a percentage of total agricultural land, they're hugely important in terms of the human diet. It's very clear, especially crop, the big economic driver associated with soil health is pest related and pest damage related. And it's virtually universally true that you have to have healthy soils to tap into microbial, and that's what you need to deal with these nematodes and other soil-borne insects. And it's common for there to be dollars or more per acre in a season at risk or in play for farmers growing high-value crops. So the question becomes, will and policy and other factors mask the need for change in soil health? Next, please. In terms of row crops, of course, account for 90% of cultivated cropland, or 85%. The big gains possible from improvements in soil health, increasing nitrogen use efficiency, where on the average conventional farm, only about 35% of the nitrogen is being utilized by the crop. Moving along, Continuum will increase the percent of time the land is converting solar energy into biomass, maybe a 30% increase. What's happened with the increase in and movement to off-farm management has really made it more difficult for these more complex systems to be cost of production are 50% in the last 20 years across most of the row crops. The per bushel profit margin is about the same amount. There's around $100 per acre of profits in play along the soil health. And again, policy drive change to capture these benefits or mask the needs. Next. That's what I've prepared to present to you, and I look forward to any questions. And I apologize for the difficulty some of you have had with the audio and video. It looked just perfect the other day, but something happened in the translation.
Thank you, Dr. Benbrook. Great information in your presentation, and we do have a lot of questions from listeners, so let's go through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. And just a reminder to our listeners as well to continue to send those in using the chat box in their control panel or emailing sarah@foodtank.com. So I'd like to start by asking you, Dr. Benbrook, a question that reads, I've read a lot about family farmers being an integral part to soil health as well. Can soil health thrive without the support or integration of small-scale and family farmers?
Yes, I think it can. The operation in Washington State that I referenced, that new 2,000 acres of organic production is part of a 24th farm. And there's several other farms in that area, including one that is 60,000 acres, 15,000 are organic. So the kind of practices that are required in the soil health continuum, they can be done on a small scale, moderate, or large scale, but obviously different equipment, different infrastructure, and certainly the economics are different. One of these see some really phenomenally productive and successful large organic farms is have the scale of comparable cost efficiencies that conventional farmers benefit from in terms of the production inputs. It's just in the case of the large-scale organic farmer are very different, but economies of scale still.
Thank you. The next question comes from a listener named Claire. She asks, how much do we know in the soil health sciences about how plants absorb specific elements in the growing process?
Wow, what a great question. I think not nearly as much as the average farmer and average soil scientist and agronomist. The literature is full now of new little surprises about how plants utilize nutrients, balances in nutrients affect the ability of a plant to utilize a particular way that it needs to. You know, the basic message from most biologically based research is that there's just a whole lot we don't understand, and that's why there's so many surprises. Farmers experiment with them, and there's so many instances where people don't know why something worked as well as it did. Sometimes why a system that worked before very well runs into big problem we don't know.
Great, thank you. And the second part to Claire's question is, do you see our knowledge about these processes improving the science of genetic modification so we can improve soil health and nutritional value of food?
Yeah, possibly. Clearly, science is develop an understanding to create seed treatments, for example, that are biologically based, or inoculants for labor, bacterial inoculant systems that are going to increase to both conventional farmers, sustainable farmers, when they introduce biologically manure compost inputs into their system. Work that by molecular biologists and engineers to try to understand the basis of certain, both in plants and in ecology, behind certain aspects of how plant root systems interact with. This work is already and will continue to write into how to develop new and softer systems. For example, it's probably not going to be more than when Washington State understand what it is about that mixture of the brassica seed meals that's working to combat apple replant disease. I mean, they know I don't understand fully why. Answering that question is a in the technology development to more efficiently and affordably comparable benefits.
Thanks, Dr. Benbrook. And you've provided a lot of really valuable information on soil health and the importance of soil health. The next listener wants to know, are there training programs or additional resources for sustainable soil health management?
Well, there certainly are some. The need and the demand substantially outstrips the supply right now in most parts of the country. And just in the last couple of years, there's been kind of a soil health awakening. That's why the UN system adopted 2014 as the Year of Soil. It's why the Soil Renaissance project begun by the Noble Foundation and the Farm Foundation. RCS has hired created a whole division on soil health, and the NRCS is in the 26 soil health specialists that will be stationed in states around the country. So there's a lot of new interest and a lot, but you know, tackling soil health is from a management point of view is actually complicated than what plant breeders and molecular biologists faced when they decided to start genetically engineering plants, and there hasn't been in understanding soil health and how to manage it that there has been in these other areas. And I think there's a high level of confidence that as that investment ramps up, we're going to discover, farmers are going to discover better ways to enhance soil health more affordably and begin to some of the problems that impose some of the highest and on the environment through the intensive use of pesticides.
Yeah, it's great to see so much more attention and resources being brought to soil health, especially with it being the 2015 being the International Year of Soils. And the next question is more technical. This listener asks, you mentioned brassica seed meals to fumigate soils. Are they antifungal as well as anti-nematode? Are there sources for info on how they work?
Yes, there are sources. If that individual would put him or her in touch with in Washington State that work for it. I don't see seed meals have fungal activity, although I wouldn't be surprised. The growers have been importing the seed meal from an Italian company that actually figured out that mixing different brassica seed expanded the range of microbial biocontrol. It's tough, and there's actually some effort underway in Washington State to develop a homegrown brassica seed meal industry, and this is a pearl of where some infrastructure and technology investment cut the price of that brassica seed. I'll bet you to a quarter of what it costs to import it from Italy. You know, it's going to take some for that to happen, and it's going to probably the progress in that direction will either be accelerated or delayed. A number of policy decisions that happen over the next years, and that's why I posed the question. You know, will policy support and drive change in a positive direction along the soil health continuum, or mask the need for that change?
Great, thank you, Dr. Benbrook. And I think we have time for just one more question, which you actually just started to address. So what are some ways consumers can support effective policies and actions for the sustainable management of and protection of soil resources?
Another great question, and one that I'm spending a lot of time thinking. There are a number of eco programs out there, from the certified organic seal to the non-GMO project, the various Food Alliance and Protected Harvest and Farm First and now a new important player on the block, the Responsibly Grown, produced by Whole Foods. Not a single one of these addresses in an effective or satisfying way. Clearly, an organic farmer is successful while eroding soil farm, but they're possible certified organic farms produce and remain certified, but not adequate attention to the dimensions of soil biology, ultimately drive or slippage on the soil health continuum. And certainly none of the other eco-label programs even begin to soil health. And one of the reasons is that until very recently, consensus about even how to define soil health, and certainly wasn't a consensus on how to measure it. Progress on both of those fronts. Now the big challenge is, so let's say a big retailer like Walmart or Safeway or Whole Foods reward farmers for advancing along a health continuum. The question becomes, what incentivize farmers to do? So there's a broad discussion going. I'm pleased to say that one of the indicators that's the attention of a lot, most people think is a positive one, is the percent of time during the growing season that a given field is capturing it's falling on the land and converting it to that one indicator is quite easy to measure, and it's one where just about everybody agrees that if you're growing something green on for a longer in a given year, you're in a stage at least for improvement in soil health. So this example of an indicator that you might read about in the next year or two being operated at least on an experiment, one or more of these eco-label or sustainability programs.
Great. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but it was a pleasure to have you here with us, Dr. Benbrook, and thank you so much for all of your knowledge. And thanks to all of our listeners for sending in their questions to make this more of an interactive discussion. So truly a pleasure for all of you to be here today. Our next webinar will be on October 7th at 12 Eastern, and that registration is open on foodtank.com. So thank you all again and have a great rest of your day.